So let me just start with good morning, at least from here in Dubai. I'm not sure where you're joining us from. Thank you again for attending this today. I am Manuja. I am the marketing manager here at Murdoch University, Dubai. And today we are joined by John and Rebecca, and two very, very experienced and qualified members of our faculty here. And in these surreal times, as we go through and learn new things every day, we thought with the abundance of knowledge that we have within ourselves, we'll start this professional development series and just share maybe a few tips that we have within us that might be useful for all of you. So I'm not going to take much of this time. I really do hope that you get something new, something interesting. If nothing, join a webinar with other people from around the world and maybe find a contact. And with that, we'll try and keep this as interactive as possible using the chat function. So I'm just going to quickly drop in and maybe introduce myself there. And then John, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Manuja, and thanks to everyone who's joined us or just joining us. I'm going to share my screen now, and you should be able to see our presentation. So as Manuja said, my name is John. I have a master's degree in education, and I've been teaching the academic English program here in Dubai at Murdoch for just over a year now. And so just want to thank everyone for being here, and would like to start with an icebreaker. So this is a presentation, of course, that I'll be giving, but I also like to see a little bit of interaction. So if you could just answer these two questions. Number one, what is your hometown? So where are you coming from? And number two, what is your favorite TV or Netflix show right now? So if you go down to the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should be able to see a chat function. I'm just trying to find it here on my screen. There it is. So I can go first. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and my favorite TV show right now, my wife and I are watching 90 Day Fiancé. It's a sort of funny reality show about real people that are the international dating scene, essentially, is what it's about. Let's see, I think, how many participants do we have? At least a few. Okay. Someone from Cavite, Philippines, also watching 90 Day Fiancé. That may or may not be my wife. All right. Beck is from Brisbane. Looks like Rihanna is from Mumbai, watching Dark at the moment. Okay. Beck is watching Ozark. Okay, great. So it looks like most of us know how to use the, okay, Ogbomo is from Lagos, residing in Dubai, and watching Extraction. Okay. I saw that movie on Netflix, right? I heard about it, haven't actually seen it yet. Okay, so it looks like most people are getting familiar with the chat function. If you have any questions, we will have a time for questions at the end. Hopefully our presentation will answer most of your questions, but if you have any pressing questions, feel free to put it in the chat box and we'll do our best to get back to you. Okay. So it's nice to see that people are keeping themselves occupied during the lockdown. Of course, now that it's slightly lifted here in Dubai, we were able to go out during the day. Yeah, it's good to have those indoor activities. Okay, so these are basically our 6 objectives, if you will, for today. I'm going to go over some top tips for online interviews. Then Rebecca, Ms. Keogh, will be going through what is a star response and how to give a really good response to an interview question. We'll have a quizzes at the end. This is also interactive. So if you have a computer or a smartphone or any internet connected device, you're using Zoom, so we know that you're connected to the internet, then we'll be able to do this quizzes live, hopefully. So some interaction there at the end. I'll talk about the academic English program, which I teach, and Manuja will close us with just how you can learn more about the programs we offer here at Murdoch. All right, so it shouldn't take the better half of an hour, we'll say, or 40 to 50 minutes. Okay, so very briefly, I'm going to share these 6 points. We're going to go over these 6 points for online interviews. We're going to go through them just one at a time, and I've just shared them here. Number 1 is do your homework. Okay, so assuming that we want to work for a company. Let's say, think about what I just want you to think about in your mind right now. What is one company or one job that you have in mind that you could picture yourself doing? Okay, it could be maybe if you want to become an engineer, you want to pursue that engineering job. If you want to become a fashion designer, you want to pursue that fashion designer job. The key here is whatever that job is, generally speaking, you want to look at what are the descriptive words does the company use to describe itself. All right, and not only that, what are the descriptive words does the company use to describe the ideal candidate? And so, for example, if you're going for an engineering job, it's going to be a different description than a fashion designer job, obviously. But the key thing is you want to do your homework. You want to know what is the company looking for and how can you provide value for them, right? So maybe you haven't worked in that specific role before, but if you understand what it is that they're looking for, then you'll have a better idea of how to explain yourself to them and show to them that you can create value for them. So I'm not going to read all these questions here, but these are just some of the questions you want to be thinking about, that you need to be thinking about as you are preparing for an interview. Don't be overwhelmed by this. I know these are obviously a lot of questions, right? But the key thing is, what it really boils down to is companies need to see that you can create value for them. And when they see that, they'll be more likely to offer you the job that you really want. So these are some questions that you should be thinking about. Okay, tip number 2, a bit more basic, right, is to use good backlighting. So I always like to make fun of my dad because whenever I'm video chatting with him, I'm either looking at the top of his bald head or up his nose, and I tease him about that. But you want to use you want to present yourself to the camera in such a way that it pops, you know, that it presents you in your best light, so to speak. So you see, I've taken a screenshot of myself with no backlight and with backlight here, and I suppose the joke's kind of on me right now because even the backlight that I'm using right now is a little bit yellowish. So you notice even my face looks like my skin is actually not orange, but it looks kind of orange, at least to me on the video. But the idea is you want to have ideally a bright white backlight. And if you notice, right, so a lot of times people think, well, I have a window or I have, you know, sunlight, which can work, right, if you're outside, but even the sunlight, if you notice on the left picture, the light is coming in from, you know, my left side, and but the right side of my face is kind of in the dark, right? Mother, this is a very common issue. We see it all the time in meetings, but if you really want your interview to pop, this is just one way to really kind of spruce it up. If you have a light that you can put behind your screen, not coming from behind you, but coming from behind your screen, then it's going to really help give that pop to your interview. Okay, just a same tip, another example. So this guy in the middle, you see he has 2 lights, right? He has one actually coming from the left side behind his screen, one coming from the right side. All right, and that's going to add a little bit more effectiveness, a little bit more pop to his presentation, right? As opposed to having kind of a shadow on one side or a shadow on the other side. All right, so you see on the left here, this is kind of the typical webcam setup. This is probably what you and I would generally tend to, right? Our desks are usually right around our, the height of our waist. And what that does with most computers or laptops is it means we're actually looking down at the person. And almost unintentionally, it kind of creates a weird feel. Like I mentioned, like if I'm talking to my dad, it's like I don't want to be looking up at his nose while he's typing on his computer, kind of thing. So ideally, if you have a way to raise your webcam to eye height, that's really going to help your presentation. So one suggestion, one hack that I could suggest to you is if you don't have like you can go to any like department store and they usually have some kind of laptop stand. But if you don't have one of those, then you can use a stack of books or a box, or even what I'm using right now is I'm putting a stool, just a short stool that's on top of my desk right now. And also you notice on the right side, the optimal webcam setup has 2 bright lights. So he's got one on the left, one on the right. That way it's not a shadow on one side as opposed to another. So these are just some tips, some hacks. Obviously you're never gonna have a perfect setup, but just some ways that you can improve it. Okay, there's the example again. So if you notice on the left, right, that's kind of the default. If I'm sitting on my desk and my desk is low and my chair is high, then when I tilt back the laptop, it's like you're looking up at me or I'm looking down at you. The second one, I'm sitting a little bit too far away and it's almost, you kind of get that floating head kind of feeling. If you look at the right, my eyes are more or less on the same height as the camera. And so it's like we're having an eye-to-eye conversation. It's more, we're doing business. We're able to connect more with this kind of a setup. Again, it's never going to be perfect, but when you have these kind of tips in the back of your mind as you're preparing, it's going to help you with your interviews. Okay, tip number 4, dress professionally. Okay, if you're a man, wear a shirt and tie. I usually wear a shirt and tie to interviews, unless it specifically says, you don't have to wear formal. But women wear a modest blouse. Don't wear super bright colors. Why? Because that can, it can just be distracting. You don't want to wear all white or all black generally. Again, so the presentation, the focus is on you. You want people to be able to focus on what you're saying and not be distracted by what you're wearing. So generally it's a generally good idea, don't wear anything sleeveless, wear soft complementary colors. So just as an example here, as you see the television presenter on the, I don't know if it's the right or the left side to you, but she's wearing white, all right? And that's actually, it's a nice shirt, it's bright, and so what it does, it distracts from her presentation. But if you see in the middle, she's wearing like a gray jacket over a black shirt, all right? And that generally, it doesn't distract from her presentation. Same with the one on the left. She's kind of got like this dark, almost like a pastel color or a dark purple color with a black shirt underneath. So she's wearing complementary colors that don't really distract from her presentation or whatever screen she's presenting behind her. Okay, same here. This is a comedian, Stephen Colbert, for the win. He's wearing a purple tie on the left, which doesn't distract from what he's saying. But if you notice, he's wearing the yellow tie on the right. Again, he's a comedian, so he could probably get away with it, but it's going to distract a little bit because your eyes are drawn down to the bright yellow color of his tie. So just some tips. Of course, the title of this presentation is language tips. So let's start talking about what type of language do we want to use. All right. So this slide says prepare answers for all these questions. Again, don't panic, don't be intimidated. You don't have to know everything all at one time. The key here is companies want to know, all right, who is this person? Can I trust this person? Is this person, do they have a track record? Do they have something that I can see that brings value to the company? All right, so this is just a list kind of shotgun style of all these kinds of questions that they will, you'll probably hear. Obviously, you won't hear all these questions in one interview, but if you spend a lot of time interviewing, like I have, then you'll start to notice patterns in these kinds of questions. So just for example, first one, tell me about yourself. Second one, why should I hire you? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why do you want to work for this company? I'm not going to read all these. I'm not going to go into detail on all these. In fact, I think part of why Rebecca's here, she'll be kind of giving us some more details on how to give an optimal response. What I want to do is focus just on that first question. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Because I think it kind of encompasses all of these questions. So the joke here, if you look at the funny comic on the side, the interviewer, he says, tell me about yourself. He's ostensibly giving a job interview, and the interviewee, the person answering, says, I like pie, right? So this guy's probably thinking, well, that's great, but what do you have to offer the company? Right? So when an interviewer says, tell me about yourself, they're not saying, tell me your detailed life story, right? They're not telling me, they don't need to know everything, right? What they need to know is really basically, and we've broken it down to an acronym here, just for simplicity's sake, EES, which is your education, employment, and skills. All right, so if you'll allow me just very briefly to go over each one of those. So your education, so where did you receive your schooling? Off the bat here, I want to point out in an international context, right? You want to use language that, I'm assuming, we're in Dubai, you're always going to be interacting in an international context. So you want to use language that applies to an international context, that applies to not just one country, but many countries, not just one nationality, but many. So just a small example from my own life. So people tell me like they completed their A-levels. I'm from the US, so like I don't exactly know what A-levels are. Of course, if you're speaking to maybe a British person or someone that comes from a Commonwealth nation, they probably understand it better. But I find it helpful to, instead of saying, oh, I completed my A-levels or I graduated with, like I could say, oh, I graduated with 4.2 GPA. Well, in some countries, that could be a great GPA. In other countries, they don't use GPA or they don't know what a 4.2 is, So you could say something like, I graduated from, Lagos High School or whatever high school you went to in the top blank percent, right? So if you want to say that you graduated well or you graduated with honors, all right, those are types of terms that anybody can understand, right? Or you could just say, I was at the top of my class, or I was the top performer in my class, right? Or if you want, that's fine. You can just mention that you graduated or that you had this kind of experience. What you want to do is just highlight something that you accomplished, right? Another example, right? So if you completed your bachelor's degree or if you completed your undergraduate, then you can say I completed my undergraduate from such and such university with a concentration in such and such, right? If you focused on one particular area, right? Or if you're at the master's level, you could say after completing my master's, or I completed my master's and then I began working on my PhD. This is just for higher level, right? Okay, employment. So some people have more employment experience than others, right? So I regularly interact with people that have many more years of experience than me. And there's times where you're going to, people say, do you have experience with this? Or do you have employment? And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. The key thing is you want to have rehearsed in your mind some form of experience that you've had before, working for a company or a group of people or an organization that has brought value to that organization, right? So I could say during my studies, I worked part-time as a recruiter, right? So I actually did, when I was in university at Texas A&M in Texas, and I was recruiting for one of the student organizations that I was part of. And I actually made between 100 and 200 phone calls every night. That's actually a true story. And I was able to recruit people for the organization, the leadership organization that I was part of. All right, so that's just an example, right? So even if it wasn't a full-time job, it was just part-time. I worked there 3 or 4 times a week, a couple hours each evening. But that's just one example, right? You could say after that, I spent so many years or so many months working as blank, right? So I could say I worked 6 months working as a waiter in a restaurant. And then after that, I got my teaching certification and I became a teacher and worked for 1 year in the Navasota Independent School District. Right, just another example. All right, so your examples will be different from mine, but the key is, what's your experience? What have you done that has brought value to an organization, right? All right, or if you want to keep it general, right? You could say, I spent so many years in this industry working as this, right? So maybe you work for more than one company, but it was all in the same industry. And so if people can see that you spent so many years focusing on this, that really speaks volumes to what you're able to do and what experience you have. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay, 11:22. I think making good time. All right, skills. Okay, people want to see not only what did you do, right? Do you have industry experience, but okay, my battery's running low. Give me 1 second, and I will plug in my battery. Okay, good to go. So Manuja, Beck, are we doing okay? Okay, just tell me if I'm going too fast or too slow. Send me a message in the chat box or something. Okay, but so skills. All right, what did you cut your teeth on? What did you do in the job that brought value to your clients, that brought value to your boss, that brought value to the people that you were working with? All right, so I could say my first year of teaching, I worked with, for me, I worked with, actually, in Texas, I've always worked with international students, right? So I worked with Spanish-speaking third graders, and from, you could say, from international backgrounds. So I would say they were mostly from actually Mexico, Guatemala, and Spanish-speaking countries. I worked with immigrants, and I was enabling them really just to pass the third grade was what I was doing my first year of teaching. And after that, I moved to Korea, and I worked with Korean speakers from Korean-speaking backgrounds, enabling them to speak English better, right? And I could talk about results that I produced, right? So my first year of teaching, I'd say 95% of my students passed the third grade. Woohoo, wonderful, right? I could say, or I built, or I designed, or I planned. The key here is, obviously your examples will be different than mine, but what you want to focus on is using what we call power verbs. All right, these are verbs that indicate that what you did in a way that speaks to an employer, right? So these are just some examples. You could say words like designed, right? You could say I designed lessons, I planned lessons, organized, I organized teams, right? Sold, I sold phones, something like that. Just examples. Converted, led, co-led, administered, implemented, managed, promoted, created, wrote, coded, rebuilt, and many more. So these are just some examples of verbs that you would want to use to talk about your skills, to talk about what you did in the context of your job. And I think if you think about your experience, right, you're always going to be doing more than one thing, right, in a job. It's never just one skill. It's never just one thing. But if you can distill it into, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3 things, it doesn't have to be a ton, but if you can distill it in such a way that that the person who's listening can get an idea of what it is that you're bringing to the team. Okay, all good. So again, I'm just going to use myself an example because that's my experience. That's what I have. So I could say I recently graduated from American College of Education with a master's degree in ESL and bilingual education, right? So that certainly helps in the education field to have that, right? So that's my education, right? I could say, right, I could probably talk for hours about my international experience and bore you, or I could distill it and I could say something like, I have over 6 years experience working full-time with international students, enabling them to build confidence and fluency in English. Okay, so what are the power verbs there, right? You notice I use words like, well, working, that's kind of a boring verb, but then I have enabling, right? Enabling is a power verb. Build confidence, right? That's a power verb and a power phrase. Right, and here I'm actually starting to brag a little bit. I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I say as the leader of the academic English program at Murdoch University, Dubai. Okay, so maybe I'm getting a little bit too big-headed here, but I'm using a power verb. I'm using the word leader, hopefully to help people understand. I say I engage, right? So that's another power verb. Planning, interactive lessons, collaborating, providing, coaching, mentoring, all right? And mentoring to motivated students, right? So these are just examples of phrases that I would use to sell myself, essentially, as an educator, right? So I'm not making stuff up, but I'm using my experience and I'm putting it into a language that an employer can understand. Okay. If you want more exercises, right? If you want to do some more research, you can look into, even if you just Google power verbs exercises, that probably be one of the first things that pops up is this foxhue.com. They have a list of all these power verbs that you can be using. And if you, by the way, if you want a link, I can put this link in the description or in the chat box, and then you can actually see it for yourself. See if I can. Oh,
I think we can send.
What's that?
Yeah. We can send it in the email as well, but yeah.
Okay, so in the email they'll be getting the PowerPoint maybe, or some of the links. Okay, no problem. So I'm basically done there. So the key takeaway here, the key to a solid interview is in presenting your specific education, employment, and skills in a way as to bring the greatest possible value to the person who has the power to hire you. Right? So I hope that's been helpful. And as far as some of the more language-focused tips, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Rebecca for how to give a star response.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John, for all those wonderful tips. I just want to start by asking people to put in the chat if they have had a job interview before, please. And can you also say if it was a good, bad, or so-so experience? I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. My microphone looks fine. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Thanks, Manuja. I'm not sure if Raina is still with us. Ogbomo, Giselle, have you had interview experience? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Raina, but the bad experiences teach us, don't they, how to improve. That's the important thing, to look back and reflect on what went wrong. And it may not have been a job interview. It may have been an interview to attend a university or to get into a college or to do an internship. Yeah, both good and bad experiences. Yeah, I think we've all had them, haven't we? Great. Well, I want to share with you a really, really useful tip for answering questions well in job interviews. I'm not sure if you've heard of a STAR response before, S-T-A-R. John, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So this is an acronym, and it's an easy way to remember how to answer one of those questions that starts with, tell me about a time when ... All right. Now, when you get that sort of question in an interview, they want you to tell a story. All right. And to make sure you cover all the key points, remember this acronym, S-T-A-R. All right. Now, the S stands for giving the people on the interview panel the situation. give them a background. What job was it, or what position were you doing? When was it? Was it last month? Was it last year? Was it in the summer? Okay, just give them some background and context. And then you'll move on to the task, which is you identifying what you needed to do at that particular time. A is for action. Okay, what did you actually do in that scenario? And R is for result. Okay, what were the consequences of your actions? Okay, and this allows you to tell a complete story to the people that are interviewing you. It's very, very powerful. John, could you go to the next slide, please? So these are some very common job interview questions where the interview panel are begging you to tell them a story, all right? Okay, so the first one I have there is tell me about a customer service problem you have experienced and what you did to resolve it, okay? Now, all of these questions that require a star response will usually start with a tell me about or have you ever beginning. Now, if you are going for a job that requires customer service, it might be you're going for a job in a coffee shop or a restaurant or in tele-sales, okay? They're going to want to know that you've had a problem and you've dealt with it well, okay? And you will definitely get a question like this. Teamwork is another common one, okay? We all have to work collaboratively. It's an essential skill. And employers want to know that their potential employee will have the teamwork skills to work with groups. The third one down there is about a technical problem. We're all working with IT at the moment, but increasingly, I mean, most of you probably in the group today are digital natives, but you still need to be able to sell yourself as someone who can learn quickly, adapt, and work with technology. So that's usually a common question too in interviews, especially if you're going for an IT related position. The fourth one may not be so common in a job interview situation where you're a new graduate. They might not be expecting too much from you in terms of leadership, but they will want you to show initiative. So still think of a way to answer these 4 common questions, all right? Now I'm going to break one of those down for you, all right? John, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so here's the question. Tell me about a customer service problem you have experienced and what you did to resolve it, right? Now, this answer is one that I worked on with my students last semester. I teach a course at Murdoch called Career Management, and I also teach one on language enhancement. And in every course that I teach, we do mock job interviews. And this was a response from one of my students when I interviewed her. We did work on it, and it was a perfect response. Okay, so situation. Last year, I was working as a sales assistant for the shoe store Charles & Keith at the Dubai Mall. It was my first week. Can you see how she set the situation already? I know where she was, when, what her job was, and how long she'd been there, all right? Then she gives a bit more detail. I remember selling a pair of high heel shoes to a customer. She came back the next week. She was very upset because one of the shoe heels had broken. She approached me and demanded an apology and compensation. She seemed quite angry. Okay. Can you see how detailed that is? And that's just the situation. But already, if I'm interviewing this girl, I'm like, okay, I really want to hear this story. I want to know what happens next. Okay. Okay, so next, please, John. So now she's got to identify what she thinks her job is, what the task is. Okay. I knew what I had to do. I had to calm the customer down. I had to try to help her and compensate her. But the problem was I'd only been in the job for a short time and I wasn't sure what I was allowed to do. You know, again, a really nice response. She's showing that she has initiative and she knows what she should do, but she's also showing that she's new and she needs to seek advice from someone more senior in the organization. Next slide, please, John. So now she's moving into what she actually did, all right? And you say this in the job interview when you're giving a star response, use the words like what I did and so, or the action I took, yeah? So they know that you're covering each key point. So what I did was showed my empathy to the customer about her situation. You know, oh, really sorry that happened, that's terrible. I feel awful that we gave you a faulty product. I explained I was new in the role and that I would seek a solution from my manager. I then approached my manager, quickly told her the situation, and she said I could offer a replacement pair of shoes and 50% off the next pair. Okay, so it's a very detailed answer here for action. And finally, we'll move to result. Next slide, please, John. So this is the last part of the answer. So I went back to the customer and shared this solution. She was relieved, very pleased. She chose her replacement pair and her second pair of shoes. And before she left, the manager came over also to offer the stores apologies and to make sure she was satisfied with the outcome. She was very happy and complimented me on my politeness and professionalism. Right? Now, if this girl had given a very short answer, she would have missed a great opportunity to really show her prospective employer her amazing people skills, her ability to think on her feet, to deal with the problem and to solve it, and to communicate. And through that story, she managed to do all that. So is everyone clear on the star response? Has anyone used a star response in an interview before? Can you just put it in the chat, please? Great, great. So it's always good to have some of these stories at the back of your mind. Think of some problems that you've had and how you've dealt with them, and have some stories in your mind. You cannot put a story like this in your CV, nor your cover letter, but you can tell it in the interview, and that's what they want. Okay, great. Okay, next slide, please, John. All right, I just wanted to share this with you. This is from the World Economic Forum. Every year they put out a report looking at the future of jobs. I believe this was the 2018 report. They always look forward 4 or 5 years, so that if you're at high school, you can start getting ready. If you're in the workforce, you can start upskilling to make sure you're competitive. As you can see, the skills that they're really looking for in the next couple of years, yes, there's the IT related skills, of course, okay? But if you look at number 1, it's analytical thinking, all right? Number 2, active learning. So can you be, if you have to do something new, all right? If someone asks you to do something you've never done before, can you do it? Can you just get in there and do it and teach yourself how to do it, okay? Employers want to see that you're able to do that. Now, the 3rd one and the 5th one and the rest of them, pretty much all the way down, are all what we call human skills, such as creativity, originality, initiative, persuasion, negotiation, emotional intelligence, leadership. These are also important. So when you go for that job interview, if you're lucky enough to be shortlisted and go for the job interview, this is your chance to show all those skills, because they don't show through on your CV. All right? And I think I may have one more slide left, John, if you could. Yeah, oh, you've got 3 more slides. Okay, another thing that can be difficult in interviews are the tricky questions. We've all had them. And there's usually just one sort of word in the question which throws you, and you're like, oh, I don't want to answer that question. So this is tricky question number 1. Have you ever made a mistake? Okay, so your immediate response inside, I think, is to go, oh, I don't want to tell them I've made a mistake, you know, and you get a bit defensive. Is that right? So think of one before you go into the job interview. Think of a mistake you've made and make sure that you have a story to tell. This is also a star response. Make sure you've got a story to tell about how you handled it and what you learnt from it. Very important. Okay, so don't be scared of these tricky questions. Next slide, please, John. This is an oldie, but unfortunately they still use it in interviews. What do you consider your strengths and weaknesses? Now, I asked this question to all of my students in the mock job interviews, and without fail, all the students start listing their strengths. I can do this, I can do that, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll end with maybe one weakness, and it will be, it'll be a bad one. It'll be something like, oh, and I'm never on time. It's like, oh, or I always miss deadlines. Okay, so what you have to do is think about how to answer this question. Don't go on too much about your strengths. Be humble, be honest, but be humble. When you talk about your weaknesses, you could do these first, actually. I think that's a good, just get it out of the way. So for your weaknesses, admit to something, not anything too major, admit to something, but also say how you've been dealing with it or how you've dealt with it. So a good one I find is to say something like, when I started university, I had to do a lot of group work. And because I didn't know the people in my group, I found it hard to let other people do the work because I like doing things well, and I didn't want to give anyone else that responsibility because I was scared that they would do a bad job. I've learned that that's not the right way to work in a group, and I've learned ways to delegate and to make sure that everyone in the group has a role. And that we follow a timeline. It's taken me some time, but I feel I can do it well now. But that was definitely a problem I had when I started university. My strengths, well, okay. So yeah, this is just an easy way to answer the question. So don't be scared when you hear some negative words thrown at you in a job interview, like weakness, mistake. Okay, just be ready for them and turn it into a positive. All right. I think I've got one more slide left, John. Yeah. Hey, everyone, if you want some practice, Barclays has a lot of online tools. This one is actually a virtual interview lab. You will have to sign up, which means giving them an email, an address, and a telephone number. They're not too strict about, the exact details. So you do have to sign up, but once you're in, there's great worksheets, and there is practice interviews for all sorts of things, like going to university, going for an internship, a summer job position, a graduate position, a managerial position. Okay, so that's it. I think John's just putting it into the chat if you want to look at it later. I do recommend it because you can have timed responses. All right. Okay. So that's it. Yeah, John's just got it up on the screen. I don't know if we have time to show it. 44, yeah, we probably do. So if you go in,
could we maybe put it in the email? I think there'll be a follow-up email, and so it's probably better there. So I just want to, I signed up for this, just using my email. It's totally free, barclayslifeskills.com. Even if you just remember that and Google it, you can probably find it. But yeah, so it looks like there's a way you can record your response using a webcam or even without a webcam, and you can just, looks like it's a very interactive kind of tutorial. Don't want to go into all the details, but it looks like a great resource. So thanks for that, Beck.
Yeah, it's great, and it's timed and recorded, so you can go back and look at your answers and realize when you do things like or when you don't sound that clear. All right. Well, that's my section finished. So I'm handing back to, I'm handing over to Manuja now, I think.
I think just before me, and thank you, John and Rebecca, I was just listening so intently and obviously trying to recount all my interviews and not trying to roll my eyes when someone asks us, so what is your biggest mistake or what is your greatest strength or weakness? So I know, at least for me, that was, I guess, a great reminder and very helpful in some ways. Before I think quickly wrap this session up, I know John was very keen to run a quick quiz, which again, as someone who's fairly competitive, I'm looking forward to. So I think I'll just pass this back to John. It's very easy. All we have to do is just go onto the joinmyquiz.com website, and John will share the rest of the details for that.
Yes, thanks, Manuja. And I do apologize if we're going a little bit longer. I said 40 to 50 minutes. I guess technically if it's 50 minutes, we have 4 minutes left. So really shouldn't take too much more time. And this is, as Manuja mentioned, a fun activity, especially for the more competitive players. So if you just go on, you can use your phone, or if you're on your computer, you can use your browser, joinmyquiz.com, and then enter that game code, 359867.
Yes, we have 3 players, 4. Nice.
Anybody else want to join? By the way, even after I click start, you'll still be able to join using the game code. Right? So it's not like Kahoot. It's not based on speed. It's just based on completion. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. And if you still want to join, just go to joinmyquiz.com. The question should be on your phone. And the game code is still up there at the top. All right, well done, Manuja. It looks like Rebecca is second and Jazz is third.
This was not fair, I promise.
Okay, should I go back to the presentation?
Yes, please. I just quickly wrap this up. Well, while we put the presentation back, everyone who has attended so far, we look forward to any questions that you might have. So you can pop them in the chat right now if you'd like, or think about them. And like I said, you will get this presentation, the entire recording, plus maybe a short feedback survey with just a couple of questions, and do let us know how you found this entire webinar. To end with, I think specifically about the academic English program and in general about Murdoch University Dubai, I'd just like to end with what we do, who we are, and you may or may not, I'm not quite sure where all of you are in your walks of life. So are you currently working? Are you a high school student? Are you maybe a graduate? But we do have, I feel, some sort of offering for everyone, and I'd quickly love to take you through that. So John, could you just run through quickly about, next slide, please.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I teach the academic English program. This is a 10-week bridge program. So it's specifically for students that just need a boost in their English before they move on to the foundations or the diploma or the undergraduate programs that we offer at Murdoch. So if you want to know more about the foundations program, let's say if you already have the TOEFL score that you need, and you can talk to Ms. Rebecca about that. But let's say if your TOEFL score or your IELTS score is just, let's say, just a half a point too low or just barely too low, then we recommend you take the academic English program. We do try to focus on developing not just academic skills, but the real world skills. So for example, how to give a presentation. I had a student tell me that his confidence in presentations just went up because he got experience with that in the class that he hadn't before. How to write a research report, how to do the research, planning, writing, things like that, how to write in the academic style, digital tools to leverage your work and study skills. So even the students from my class are telling me they're interacting with some tools like Google Drive and Google Docs in ways that they weren't aware of before. So we do try to, make it worth your time. And the next course start date, if anyone is interested, is June 7th. We have 3 or 4 intakes every year, and so the next one is June 7th. If you or anyone you know is interested, feel free to point them our direction.
Great. Can we quickly just go through maybe something about the university? So we are obviously an Australian university based here in Dubai. We are one of the campuses that the original university, Murdoch University, has in Perth. So we have campuses in Perth, Singapore, and here in Dubai. John, can we move? So like I said, we have 3 different campuses, but what I'd like to specifically talk about is obviously the Dubai campus, since we all represent that, and I have more experience with that campus. But I'd like to believe we are a small niche community. If family is maybe too cheesy for a lot of people, but it definitely feels a close-knit community that we have here in Murdoch Dubai. So even with the number of students that we have, I generally end up knowing a lot of students on campus, and so would the faculty here. So between John and Rebecca and everyone else that I know, we know people on first name basis. You're not just a face in the crowd. You don't get lost in this whole transition to university, whether you are maybe starting your higher education or coming back for your postgraduate courses, or just looking to maybe upskill or reskill yourselves. So can we move forward? In general, we are obviously a highly ranked and accredited university based in Australia. And because everything that we offer here in Dubai in terms of the courses and the course content is exactly of what's delivered in, say, Perth, the home campus, we enjoy that same quality of the content structure and the units, and with our international faculty, we ensure it's delivered in that same sort of quality assurance that you would expect getting this Australian education here. So as a university, we've been ranked in the global top 100 for the last 7+ years. We have great ratings and feedback even from students, just in terms of the career and learning support that we get. So if you have been through with been with us throughout this presentation, you would have heard John obviously talking about students getting confidence in presentation skills, or Rebecca talking about doing mock interviews. So it's not just focused on what you will learn, say, in the your academic side of things, or what I would learn in a Bachelor of Science. So I will pick up my IT skills and I'll pick up all of those critical skills, but we always focus on what more do you need to be career ready when you graduate with us. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide, please?
Can you see it, or is it frozen? Why choose? The one that says why choose?
Oh, I'm sorry. These are, yeah. So I will not go through, I think either my internet connection is unstable, plus these are pretty much condensed into what I've said earlier. You will receive this, like I said, presentation at the end of it. But if you are looking for, John, can you just go to the slides which has maybe all the program listings? I think it's the one after this. So if you are looking at doing either of these courses, you know someone apart from these obviously are undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. We have English language courses, we have foundation and diploma courses as well. So any information that you need on this, you can just contact us directly. And that's about it. I think my contact details are on the last slide. Right there. So do stay in touch. I actually, while I was looking at the attendees, I think she's just stepped away now. There was a current student as well. And that's how well, I guess, we know our students, that when a name pops up, we're like, oh, we know who that person is. So stay in touch. Thank you again, I guess, from all of us for joining. Do share your feedback, either if you want now or any questions that you might have through the chat function. And I hope you found this useful.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Manuja. Thanks, Rebecca.